evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gord McCall. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Lyric Theatre here in downtown Swift Current. It's my pleasure to welcome you all tonight to our very first lyric digital stage, featuring Write Out Loud, our literary program. We're going to feature all of our core programming over the coming weeks so that you don't miss out on anything. Open Stage will begin next week online. That'll be Friday night at 7 o'clock, and another Write Out Loud on Saturday. And then we'll be moving, not onto, but we'll be including Postcards at the Speed of Light and also Youth Talent Night. So you can look forward to that. Now, just before we get started, I wanted to mention something that you probably already know, and that is that we're in some financial difficulty at the Lyric Theatre because of our situation that we share with everyone in the community and the country and the world. So our revenue is based on box office, and of course, we have no box office right now. And for the immediate foreseeable future. So if it's possible, if you could help out in any way, we would really appreciate it. And if you can't financially, that's fine. We're just happy to have you part of the Lyric family. So if $20 works for you, that could be a help to us. If it's less, that's fine. If it's more, that's fine. All you have to do is write a check or money order to the Lyric Theatre, Post Office Box 1143, Swift Current, S9H3X3. Or if you want to make an e-transfer, you simply make it out to treasurer@lyrictheatre.ca. treasurer@lyrictheatre.ca. Thanks so much. If you can help out, we'd really appreciate it. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to pass the proceedings over to Terry Toews, who's on the Write Out Loud committee, to get us started. Here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Write Out Loud, the COVID-19 physically distanced version. We are part of the new online lyric digital stage program, and we're happy to be part of it. I am Terry Toews, and I'm a member of the Write Out Loud committee for the Lyric Theatre in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, the little theatre on the prairies. Until we can meet again personally at the Lyric, we, as the committee, are so pleased to be able to bring you this online version of a Write Out Loud event. I hope you are staying safe and healthy, and I hope that most of us are learning some valuable lessons about what is truly important in our lives. I hope one of the lessons we learn is the value of the arts. Throughout this lockdown, we have been treated to virtual tours of galleries and museums. We have seen some amazing free concerts, and many of us have had much more time to read, to enjoy movies, to pursue our own creative pursuits, and to play and listen to music. I hope when this is over, we will all remember that the arts helped us through a very difficult time in our shared history. I hope that that will translate into support and increased support for the arts. The arts are a need, not a want. Of course, it takes an entire team of people to bring you something like this, and our first and biggest debt of gratitude is to our authors who have generously volunteered their time to help us bring you this event online. They, along with the dedicated staff at the Lyric, all of our volunteers, and of course you, our audience, are the reason that Write Out Loud has become a successful program, and the reason that we continue to be able to bring you this program at the Lyric Theatre. I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to offer all of our love and support to Nova Scotians who are going through an even more difficult time than the rest of us. In addition, I would like to thank each and every hospital worker, everyone in healthcare, in every capacity, in every field. And I would like to also thank the frontline workers, our essential workers, who have tried to make our lives at least a little more normal in a very abnormal time. We will never forget this. You will now and forever be our heroes. Thank you. And thank you, our audience, for being here with us for our online Write Out Loud event. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Gail Bowen, and I'm the author of the Joanne Kilbourne-Shreve Mystery Series. As everyone watching this knows, we're living in a time of unprecedented change. The present is uncertain, and we are all anxious about the future. But as they have since the beginning, the arts, with their power to heal and give hope, remain with us. The Lyric Theatre here in Swift Current has been home to music theatre, movies, dance, readings, meetings, and comedy shows, and everything in between. I am one of the many writers who will be taking part in Write Out Loud's component of the Lyric Theatre digital stage. I'll be reading today from the 19th Joanne Kilbourne-Shreve novel, The Unlocking Season. It will be published on September 1st, and just in time for all the good things in the fall, at any rate. The passage I'll be reading from comes midway through the novel. A production company is filming a 6-part TV series called Sisters and Strangers about the tangled relationships of Joanne's family. Joanne has worked closely with Georgie Shepherd, who's writing the script for the series. In this scene, Joanne is about to attend the first table meeting of the production crew for Sisters and Strangers. This is when all the people who are working on the series, the actors, the writers, costume designers, lighting director, the musical director, locations manager, all of them come together to explain the work they have been doing so far to bring the production to life. Since the life that they will be filming is Joanne's own, she is apprehensive. And now here's the reading. And here's the cover of the book. There. Okay. The table meeting was being held at the Living Skies office in what was called accurately, if unimaginatively, the big room. Georgie was waiting for me inside the building when I arrived. Standing beside her was a broad-shouldered, imposing man with obsidian eyes, a mellow brown complexion, a shaved head, and a captivating smile. Georgie introduced him as Hal Dupuis, the costume designer for Sisters and Strangers, and when Hal's large, strong hand enclosed mine, I felt the warmth of connection. "You're Miss Ellard," he said. "Thank you for sharing the home movies Ben Bendure made of your family's life. They've been an inspiration." "Please call me Joanne," I said. "And it's Joanne Shreve. I haven't been an Ellard for almost 4 decades." He bowed. "I apologize." Hal Dupuis' voice was low and sonorous, and he spoke with the precision of a man who treasured language. "I didn't know about your marriage," he said. "We've only been given the films of the years between your birth and your 16th birthday." A frisson of apprehension rippled through me. I didn't realize those movies would be circulated. "Then I must apologize again," Hal said. "But please know those home movies have been invaluable, not just to me and my colleagues at Makeup and Wardrobe, but to the production designer, the locations manager, the set constructive coordinator, the music producer, the food stylist, everybody." I was overwhelmed. Suddenly it seemed that, like Alice, I'd stumbled headfirst into the rabbit hole. "There's a food stylist?" Hal Dupuis' hearty laugh seemed to come from somewhere deep within. "Oh yes," he said, "and he has had far too much fun learning how to make candied violets the way Nina Love did." Hal cupped my elbow in one of his huge hands. "Let's go in and meet everyone. Once you see the ways in which we've used what you've given us, perhaps you'll forgive us for being intrusive." There were perhaps 25 people at the meeting, except for Nick Kovacs, who greeted me with a hug, and Ainsley, George, and Fontatusis. I knew no one. But as Hal guided me around, making the introductions, everyone was cordial and commented on how helpful Ben Bendure's home movies had been to their preparations. Ainsley was the head of the table, And when she spotted us, she gestured to the 3 empty places to her right, and Georgie, Hal, and I settled in. I should have told you about the movies being circulated, Georgie said. Don't worry about it, I said. They've obviously served a purpose. Georgie tended her fingers and looked at them thoughtfully. There's something else. Because of the movies, everyone at the table feels intimately connected with your family and Sally's. But for us, you're all just characters to be dressed or lighted or moved in and out of a scene. No one will be intentionally insensitive, but Ainsley cut her off. I'll handle it, Georgie. She was very pale, and the circles beneath her eyes seemed to have darkened with every sleepless night. Ainsley was 44, Roy's age. The night they danced so blissfully to begin the beguine, it seemed they were 2 people whom age would never touch. But they had been mortal after all. Now, 5 months later, Roy was dead, and Ainsley was suddenly old. As soon as she turned to face the group, the chatter stopped, and the room became quiet. Before we begin, she said, I'd like to welcome Joanne Ellard-Shreve to the table and ask everyone to remember that the characters we're dealing with were people Joanne knew and loved. I know you will show them and Joanne the respect they deserve. She turned to the series producer. Now Fawn will get us started. I had only met Fawn Toews on a few occasions, but each time I'd been impressed by her quiet intelligence and her composure. She'd spent years in the film industry and had learned the importance of watching and listening from the elders on Poundmaker Cree Nation near Cutknife, Saskatchewan. Gabe Vickers' sudden death had rocked the lives of everyone in his orbit, but it had also raised serious questions about the fate of his company Living Skies Productions and about the future of the company's major project, Sisters and Strangers. But whatever else he was, Gabe Vickers was a dynamic executive producer, and he left what would have been his final project in great shape. The financing for Sisters and Strangers was in place, 2 of the principal actors had been signed, and negotiations with Gabe's first choices for the other 5 principal roles were in final stages. The heads of all the departments had been chosen, and the series director and writer were already at work. Everything was where it had to be, but time was not on the side of Sisters and Strangers. Rosamund Burke would be 81 when shooting was scheduled to begin. She was in good health, but as Rosamund herself pointed out, working 12-hour working days could be taxing for an actor who was no longer an ingenue. At 18, Val Fraser was still able to pass as Sally at 14, a girl on the cusp of becoming a woman. That delicate balance was critical in the early episodes of the series, but if the project were delayed, Val would almost certainly outgrow the part. Fawn looked around the room and said, this is primarily a creative meeting, so this is the time for me to step back, listen, and take notes. I have met with you individually, and each of you has identified your department's needs and flagged possible bumps in the road. I'll be meeting regularly with heads of departments, but if you discover you need special equipment, run into an unexpected expense, or face a problem with time, please let me know as soon as possible. I'll end by saying what I always say, no path is without obstacles. They are as frustrating as they are inevitable, but often the way you overcome the obstacle opens a new creative path, so hang on. Try the options, talk them out, and if nothing works, remember we're all in this together. Everyone working on this project has the same goal. We all want to make something incredible. We are co-creators. We've got you covered. You are safe.
Hi there. My name is Jessica Williams. I'm a children's picture book author from Swift Current, and I am thrilled to be here for the Write Out Loud digital stage for the Lyric Theatre. This is such an awesome opportunity. I'm delighted to have been invited. So thank you so much to Terry and Gord for making this all happen. This is a great opportunity to reach out and share some writing with the people of Swift Current in the area, the Southwest. So I hope you enjoy this and we get to keep doing these sorts of events while everyone is sort of stuck at home in these strange times that we're going through. So as I mentioned, I am a picture book author. So typically the things that I write are for the 3 to 7 age group. I do have one story that's for a little bit younger, the 0 to 3 sort of range. But I love writing books for children. They're so much fun. You can really do anything in a picture book. Because kids have these spectacular imaginations and it doesn't really matter what you put out there, they'll roll with it. So I've really enjoyed writing picture books. The story that I'm going to share with you today is my 5th published picture book. My first one, Mama's Cloud, came out in July of 2018, followed by The Mealtime Monster that fall. And then Scaredy Callie was in the spring of 19. Fall of 19 was My Koala Doesn't Take Baths, and then You Can't Invite a Fish to a Dance Party came out in November of 2019. So this particular story came to me quite quickly, and the sort of origin story of it was that my husband and I were putting our 5-year-old's daughter to bed, and she wasn't really interested in going to bed, which is pretty common, I would say, for 5-year-olds. But she didn't want to go to bed. She had too much energy. And so we decided we would have a dance party to burn off some of that energy in her room. So we put on some music and started jumping around and bouncing around her room and just generally being really silly. And then our dog came running into the room, happy to be a part of it. And he started jumping and pawing at our legs and bouncing around. And we said, "Look, Ollie's here. Should we invite him to our dance party?" And without missing a beat, our 5-year-old said, "Yeah, but you can't invite the fish." And it struck me as such a funny comment. I mean, obviously it would be really hard to bring a fish to a dance party. And my head just started spinning with this idea and this comment. So I quickly excused myself from the dance party to go and to jot down "You can't invite a fish to a dance party" on a piece of paper so that I would remember and be able to come back to it later and start working on this idea. Once I started working on it, the story came fairly quickly. It just flowed. So "You can't invite a fish to a dance party" started off with just that single sentence and really went from there and turned into a story about inclusion and allowing people autonomy over their own decisions and their own lives, and which I think is a really important message for children to receive and to understand at a young age, that just because somebody does something differently than you doesn't mean they shouldn't be allowed or should be excluded. And people can make decisions for themselves. So that's really where the story came from. Now, an interesting facet to writing children's books is that they have very few words. So the general the general word range for a picture book is between 500 and 1,000 words. 1,000 is the high-end max. So you have very few words to really convey a message. But luckily, even when you make every word count, there's also the pictures that add this whole new level and facet to your story. I love making picture books for that specific reason, because you can tell so much with your words and then you can tell so much with the illustrations. So it's really two halves of a whole. And I was fortunate enough when I started looking for an illustrator for this project. I had seen the work of Jimena de la Vega online before, and I loved her style and her characters and how much personality she would put into her animal characters. And I knew that she was who I really wanted for this story. I could just picture it. So I reached out to her and she agreed to work with me on it, and I was absolutely thrilled. So because I think picture books really do need to have that visual side to them when they're being read, I am going to slide myself over here a little bit and make sure that you can see. There we go. Make myself a little smaller. Make sure that you can see exactly what's happening in the illustrations, because they're important. So I will read to you You Can't Invite a Fish to a Dance Party. As I mentioned, it came out in November of 2019. And I hope that this sort of speaks to you maybe, and that you can enjoy the illustrations as well. So, You Can't Invite a Fish to a Dance Party. The pets all agreed. Fish couldn't be invited to the dance party. It was too dangerous. What if his bowl fell and broke? What if a thirsty cow wandered by and slurped up all the water? Besides, they reasoned, fish wouldn't have any fun. Fish don't have feet for dancing, and they can't sing karaoke. No, they simply could not invite Fish. But Fish had other ideas. Cat warmed up his voice for karaoke. He turned around and was startled to see Fish blowing quiet bubbles. It looked like he was singing, but there was no sound beside the gentle popping as the bubbles burst. Cat panicked. Fish must be running out of air in his bowl. Cat scrambled to blow bubbles into the water. Jostled. Fish stopped singing. Cat decided that was that. He absolutely could not invite a delicate creature like Fish to the dance party. Fish decided to try something different. Dog was practicing her dance moves. She liked to run in circles and chase her tail best of all. When she stopped to clear her head, she saw Fish spinning in circles in his bowl. Dog laughed as Fish spun and spun, but when Fish stopped spinning, he tipped over and drifted downward in his bowl, worn out and dizzy. Dog ran to the bowl, certain that Fish had made himself ill. Fish smiled and began to swim again, but Dog was still worried. She carefully moved Fish's bowl to a place around the corner where he wouldn't be able to see her running in circles. Fish was clearly too small to keep up with the rest of the pets. Dog absolutely could not invite him to their dance party. Fish was not discouraged. Rabbit loved dance parties. He could hop and bounce as much as he pleased. Outside, Fish noticed Rabbit leaping and thought it looked like great fun. He began to jump too. Fish seemed to be enjoying himself, so Rabbit bounced closer to his bowl. During some exuberant bounds, Rabbit lost his balance and bumped into the bowl. It tottered, sloshing water over the sides. Rabbit scrambled to steady it. Fish didn't look hurt, but one could never be too careful, so Rabbit moved Fish and his bowl to a picnic table a safe distance away. It was just the sort of close call that convinced Rabbit he absolutely could not invite Fish to their dance party. As Fish's friends kept him away, for his own good, he began to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe he had no business at a dance party. After all, his friends cared about him. What if they knew what he could do better than he did? Before long, the party began in the clearing. Fish could hear the music and see his friends having fun. He swam sadly in his bowl. Parrot looked up suddenly when she noticed beautiful rainbows glancing across the leaves. Where were they coming from? Parrot stopped bobbing to the music and watched, mesmerized, as fish swam in smooth figure eights. The sunlight sparkling through the glass decorated the ground with magical colors and patterns. As fish swam, he began to feel better. He picked up speed, and soon he started to sing. The other pets turned to see what had distracted Parrot. What they saw astounded them. Fish was singing, spinning, leaping, and sloshing. He didn't have legs for dancing, and they couldn't hear him sing, but Fish was doing all of the things they did in his own way, and he looked delighted. Maybe they had been wrong about their friend. The pets all agreed. Fish would always be invited to their dance parties. He was too wonderful to miss. So that is You Can't Invite a Fish to a Dance Party. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the illustrations as well. It's always a fun one to read, and hopefully it helped to fill maybe a little void in your life where maybe you haven't had a lot of dance parties. Maybe it's time. So thank you again so much to Terry and Gord and the Lyric for putting this event on and letting me be a part of it. I hope to be back and participate in a lot of these in the future. If you would like more information about my books, you can visit my website at jessicawilliamsonpaper.com. And thank you again so much, and I hope you enjoy all of your dance parties. Take care.
Well, here we are in Saskatchewan, springtime 2020, and there's no baseball to be seen, and I miss that. My name's Dwayne Brenna. I wrote a book of poetry about baseball back in 2013. It was published by Hagios Press. It was reprinted by Radiant Press in 2017, and you can purchase this book online through Amazon or at your local bookstore or by calling Radiant Press in Regina, Saskatchewan, and they'll send you a copy. I'm going to read you a couple of poems. Every poem in this book is based on a true story. It either happened to me or to somebody I knew or to somebody somewhere in the world. This first poem is called Ruts. It's based on an incident that happened to me about 10 years ago when I was driving out to a baseball field in Diefenbaker Park in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan with some friends of mine on the 1st of May, only to find that somebody had taken a 4x4 onto the diamond and ripped up the grass and shale, knocked down the home run fence, and I wrote a poem about it. Ruts. What vivid anger drove him to this place to rail and vent against all innocence? Did a coach in Little League chastise him for a missed pop fly? A father shout at him for striking out? Was he bullied by some bigger kid who wanted shortstop to himself? Maybe he was sick of winter. That can happen in Saskatchewan. We're all as mad as hares when March is done. He drove his father's 4x4 onto the baseball field, cranked 360s till the ruts were deep as canyons, deep as creases on the face of God. Maybe others egged him on. His last indignity was leveling a corner of the home run fence. The old guys standing at the mound let slip their baseball gloves. Survey the carnage on the 1st of May. The sky is overcast. They look like sacks of winter-kept potatoes in their sweats. No one understands the punks, all hepped up on halo and designer drugs. It's inconceivable that anyone would drive a truck across the infield grass. Riggsy spits tobacco on the shale. These kids, they never could have played the game. The rest is silence deeper than when worlds burn out. Tomorrow they will bring their hammers, nails, and rakes to fix this greenest patch of earth before the heavens break. Now this next poem that I'm going to read didn't actually happen to me. It happened somewhere in New York City in 1956. And if you lived there at that time, you would have felt it personally. It's the date when the Brooklyn Dodgers left for the West Coast and later became the Los Angeles Dodgers. It's called Ebbets Field. Weary Willie wipes his tears and rests his head on Campanella's shoulder. He can't believe the circus leaves today. September now. The Dodgers beat the Pirates. There is no celebration to mark the passing of the summer boys. Moses and O'Malley can't agree. Where should Ebbets go? The prophet dreams that Flushing Meadows would be nice. O'Malley knows that once you leave the borough, Timbuktu or Tokyo are as good as elsewhere in New York. Shit happened here. DeRocher cuffed a mouthy fan somewhere in the bowels of this place. Jackie broke down walls, and let us not forget in 1955 the upset of the Yanks. The Duke sits in the empty stands. His friends are on the plain, palm trees, movie stars, Chavez Ravine, a dynasty out west, and then the Giants leave Manhattan. The people on the street will not forgive O'Malley or even say his name without first horking on the dirty stones. I'll also read a more personal poem. It's about my father and me. And as you know, baseball is often about fathers and sons. This is about my first trip to a baseball practice, riding in my father's truck on the way into a small town called Nacum on Highway number 6. This poem is called You're Gonna Like This Game. Pickup truck, brush painted red, careening through the silent clouds of dust. My dad is in the driver's seat, skinny, way too young to be a dad. Wheat chaff on the shoulders of his shirt. He guns it up the hill, my stomach's in my throat. Wee-hoo! I'm sitting right beside him, staring at a baseball glove. My brother's pancake hand-me-down. Nicely broken in, my dad would say. I've got my fingers crossed, hoping I'll be good. Then we're on the blacktop, telephone posts go speeding by. My dad says, "Think you're gonna like this game?" I tell him, yeah, but I'm not sure. We purr through town, end up near the school, 6 or 7 kids already there, swinging bats at bluebelly flies. The red door creaking open. "Don't forget your cap." And just before it shuts, I hear my dad. "Don't be shy," he says, "and tell him you can pitch." And finally, let me read you a poem called The Tao of Baseball. I met a Taoist once, and he told me a little bit about the Taoist religion. And I thought that it would be a remarkable application for the game of baseball. But for what you think, the tidy orb will find its proper path. Welcome nothing, nothing to expect. Mind like a mirror, no worries and no fears, accepting like the hunchback what life throws at you. If your hand's a chicken, lay an egg. If a bow, then shoot. Hunchbacks do what hunchbacks do. Beg along the silken road. Not I, not me. The universal all, one with the game, its subtle dance, the pitcher leads, the batter follows, and the umpire calls. All must be forgiven. All must be forgotten, a lousy memory's the best. I see you standing like a wooden rooster. Gets late early out here, Yogi said. The game is long. Cut my pizza in 6 slices, can't eat 12. Eat the wind and drink the dew. Dance, breathe, fall in love. Make sushi. Why are the Japanese so good at this game? Thank you for listening. I wish you all a happy spring. God bless.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to read for Write Out Loud. I'm Diane Miller from Swift Current. Like many of you, I'm intrigued by family history. My grandmother, Anna, shared a number of fascinating stories about her youth. But, of course, we didn't write anything down and didn't ask enough questions. To tell this particular story about my great-grandparents, Paulina and Andrew, and my grandmother as a toddler, I've incorporated the few facts I remember, research I've undertaken, observations from a memorable trip to Poland, and considerable imagination. Please enjoy, and please forgive my mispronunciations of the Polish words that I've included. Mrs. Mosachuk, a fine spring day, don't you agree? The lusty baritone startled Paulina. Dzień dobry, Mr. Lipinski. It is indeed a good day. Usually, Paulina made time for her portly neighbor, whose conversation irritated like the incessant buzz of a fly. Today, however, the children needed some air, and she sought tranquility among the oaks and lindens in Warsaw's lovely Park Krasinski. Mr. Lipinski ruffled Olga's blonde curls and, reaching down, tweaked Anna's nose. Paulina suppressed a grin when the toddler wrinkled her face and swatted at his beefy hand. Another girl, Mrs. Mosachuk? He nodded toward the pram and the squirming bundle now named Maria. Yes, now there are 3, said Paulina, biting her tongue in anticipation of his unsolicited advice. You must be eating too many sweets. Sour foods will bring a boy, you know. He nodded his shaggy head. Paulina managed to wipe any expression from her face. Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Lipinski. I'll be sure to purchase some lemons at Market Square. And stifling a giggle, she hurried the girls along her intended path. She settled on a park bench and turned up the collar of her cloth coat against the June breeze. A quick glance assured her Maria slept, and as Anna toddled after Olga, Paulina faced the dread she'd been pushing aside. She'd prayed the new year would bring an end to the terrible unrest, but the worker and student strikes of 1905 continued unabated. Each time Anze donned his crisp police uniform and left for work, a fist of anxiety knotted in her stomach. She had begged, "Why police work? Your father would find you something else." Think of the girls, if not me. He brushed aside her entreaties, even as he cradled little Maria in his arms or lay on the floor with Olga and Anna tugging on his mustache. What else is there? If I were a doctor like father, I'd never be home. Would you rather I marched down Ulika Lukashinsky as a striking factory worker? You wouldn't be living in a fine house with gas lights and a telephone. She couldn't change his mind, and in spite of her reservations was proud of his promotion to chief of his unit at just 28 years of age. When they married, they'd been lulled into believing Warszawa's prosperity of the 90s would stretch on like a pebble-free road. Even as puppets dancing on Russian strings, they still thought of themselves as Poles, and took pride in the Poles who graced the world stage as authors, composers, and scientists. Poland's few days of peace ended with Russia's military loss to Japan. The Russian bear, smarting from defeat, turned its aggressive claws to the Western Front as a buffer against Germany. On trips through Castle Square on her way to the market, Paulina did her best to avoid the increasing numbers of Russian military units deployed as intimidating guard dogs. She shuddered, remembering the sight of 3 soldiers restraining a Jew against Sigismund's column. Another lopped off his side curls as they sneered and laughed. She wished the old king would step off his pedestal and use his sword on the perpetrators. She wished minorities were fair game, and as Protestants of German descent, she and Anze were very much in the minority. The farmers in her home village of Oshini complained of restrictions on land use and ownership. Many sons had been forced into labor in the factories and coal mines at Łódź or been conscripted into the Russian army. Now, unemployed Polish workers roamed the country, or if they did find work in the factories serving Russia, instigated strikes in protest of working conditions and in demand of political freedom. The unrest in the textile factories of Łódź had spread like a smoldering grass fire to Warsaw until the Russians cast a net of martial law over the city and dozens died. Paulina especially felt the weight of the deaths that had marred last year's May Day celebrations. I tried to stop it. Anze's face had been grim. Kazmarek, Gorsky, and Zelinsky lost their nerve and fired into the crowd. 30 strikers fell. 30 lives taken in panic. He shook his head in frustration. He had dismissed the 3 men from the force, and Paulina knew in doing so had earned himself dangerous enemies and the simmering anger of his unit. Paulina shivered as a bank of gray clouds blocked the sun's warmth. A passing breeze tugged tendrils from the tidy twist at the base of her neck. Smoothing the wayward strands, she wondered if Poland were destined to suffer under the clouds of oppression forever. Anna's delighted squeal interrupted her reverie, and she allowed herself a smile at her children's antics. For a while, Paulina would cleanse her unease in their innocence. Time to go home, girls. Anze leaned his head back against the settee. After their initial joy at Daddy's appearance, the girls were playing quietly on the rug with their dolls. Piwo, proszę, kochania. The anxiety weighing like a felt blanket on Paulina's shoulders lifted when she recognized the lack of tension in his voice. It had been a long time since he called her sweetheart. She smiled and leaned forward to place a light kiss on her husband's lips as she handed him his bottle of Schwyz pale lager, then shrieked in surprise when he pulled her into his lap and returned her kiss with ardor. Olga and Anna giggled, and it crossed Paulina's mind that she must purchase lemons tomorrow. After a supper of cabbage, sauerkraut, and egg noodles, Paulina readied the girls for bed, and after good-night kisses all round, she and Anze sipped from glasses of krupnik, the honeyed vodka a perfect digestif at the conclusion of an enjoyable evening. For the first time in months, Paulina felt the taut muscles in her neck relax, but their conversation invariably turned to the unrest plaguing the city. Some of Josef Pilsudski's hooligans raided the tax office today, roughed up the clerks and burned some records. Anze frowned. We got there in time to make one arrest, but the others got away. Did he give you information about the combat organization? I can't believe the Socialist Party approves of their tactics. No, the fool wouldn't talk. You'd think they'd see that armed resistance against the Russian police and raids on post offices and mail trains brings wrath on all our heads. Lately, we've seen more Okrana cracking down on dissidents. Okrana? Special police units, Ruski thugs sent from Moscow to detain and torture. We're powerless to curtail their heavy-handed methods. Paulina studied the yellow roses on her print dress and thought sadly of the Jew in Castle Square. I heard Pilsudski is even instructing party members to boycott the election in favor of an uprising. Anze absent-mindedly smoothed his mustache. It all comes down to who has the most muscle, and I'm afraid the Russians tip the scales there. Paulina sighed. I wish more people would follow Domovsky. His National Democratic Party seeks negotiation and election to the Russian Duma. No fighting. The tension in her neck had returned. Pilsudski isn't interested in taking the long road. Guess we'll keep filling the cells at Paviak prison. Just as he tipped his head back to drain his vodka, a sharp rap sounded at the front door. Alarmed, Paulina uncrossed her legs and moved to the edge of her seat. Who could that be at this hour? Anze set down his glass and heaved himself from his leather chair. Better be important. On the doorstep stood Pyotr Volchak, Anze's second-in-command. Sorry to be so late, sir, but thought I should warn you. He stood rigidly at attention, but his voice telegraphed the import of his words. Come in. Anze stepped back to allow Pyotr's entry. Warn me? Pyotr removed his cap and twisted it in his hands. The men, sir. Zelinsky, Kazmarek, and Gorsky. There's talk they're planning something. Figure to get even for losing their jobs. Paulina clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a groan rising from her gut. Any idea what the plan is? Anze's voice and bearing transformed from that of loving husband and father to that of commander. And Paulina glimpsed the qualities that earned him respect and promotion. No real idea, but I think it could be soon, and I fear they mean you harm. Pyotr glanced at Paulina. I'm sorry to worry you, Mrs. Mosachuk. Anze squared his shoulders. Thank you, Deputy Volchak. I appreciate your concern. But it's likely the three buffoons were simply wallowing in a vat of piva and barking like toothless dogs. He laughed. A good and proper hangover should put an end to their plan. I hope you're right, sir. Pyotr replaced his cap and turned to leave. May I come in the morning to accompany you to the station? Not necessary, Pyotr. I'll keep my eyes open and be fine, said Anze as he ushered Pyotr out the door. In seconds, Anze had Paulina enveloped in his arms, cradling her head under his chin. It'll be all right, he soothed, as sobs overtook her. You don't know that, she wailed into his chest. These men have already killed. What's one more to them? What would the girls and I do without you? I'll be fine, and you and the girls will be fine. He lifted her chin, kissed her forehead, and grinned. Besides, you could return to Oshini and find yourself a good, solid farmer who doesn't put people in Paviak for a living. Now it's time for bed and no more worries. Kohamcha, Anze whispered in Paulina's ear the next morning as he disentangled himself from her arms and left for work. I love you too, she replied to the closed door. Anna and Olga squabbled over a rag doll in the kitchen until Paulina distracted Anna with an apple. During the momentary truce, she retrieved a squalling Maria from the trundle bed in their room. Once she was dry and lustily sucking breakfast from her welcome source, and the other two were spooning mouthfuls of porridge, Paulina allowed a sliver of fear to peek through the cracks in her courage. Just as she admonished herself for worrying, they heard a thump on the back porch floor. Before Paulina could object, Olga ran to see what happened. She returned laughing. "Broom fall on floor," she announced. Paulina blanched. A broom falling without cause. A claw of fear squeezed her throat as she recognized the ancient omen of misfortune. Mugwort. She remembered how her mother tied sprigs of mugwort to their doors and windows to ward off evil spirits. O'Shinny's farmers hung mugwort branches under barn eaves to keep sorcerers from milking the cows dry during the night. She'd scoffed at such superstitions as she grew up, but now, feeling helpless in the face of her husband's peril, the old beliefs surfaced. Well, it couldn't hurt. She wrapped the now sleeping Maria in a large shawl on her back, dressed Anna and Olga in their coats, and off they went to find the tall wormwood tree. An hour later, she arranged branches at all openings to the house. Paulina passed the rest of the day in the kitchen, distracting herself by baking loaves of braided egg bread and preparing a sweet gingerbread piernik cake. She had some plum jam in the pantry, but would have to buy chocolate tomorrow at Market Square. Along with lemons, she reminded herself. Table set and a pot of steaming borscht on the stove, Paulina's unease grew as dinner time came and went. The girls complained of hunger, so she fed them and coaxed them into their nightgowns with the promise they could come downstairs to say hello when their daddy came home. She hung up her apron and tidied her hair in the hallway mirror, examining her unlined face and auburn waves with a critical eye. She grimaced. She'd soon be a 24-year-old who looked 50 if she were constantly frightened for Anze's safety. She tried to sit and read, but soon leaped up to pace from one room to another, peering through the curtains every 5 minutes. The measured ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer pounded on her nerves like a mallet on an aching tooth. Where could he be? She knelt on the living room floor, hands clasped, and gazed at their painting of Jesus among the angels. Please let him be safe. Vigorous rapping on the front door interrupted her prayer. Dread immobilized her for a moment, but the insistent knocking drew her, movements sluggish as through mud. Anna and Olga, alarmed by the din, stood on the stairs peering through the spindles. "Mrs. Mosachuk, the chief's been shot." Pyotr Volchuk and another officer supported Anze between them, the front of his uniform soaked in blood and his head lolling forward. Adrenaline trumped fear. In there, Paulina pointed to the living room, on the settee. She slammed the door after them and followed as they carried Anze and lay him down. "Fetch his father, Dr. Mosachuk," she instructed the men. The one she didn't know rushed out, but Pyotr stayed. "Anze, can you hear me?" Paulina demanded as she unbuttoned his jacket. He moaned. "We must stop the bleeding. Get towels from the kitchen." By the time Pyotr returned, she'd pushed a lap quilt against the wounds. "Love you, and girls." Paulina leaned close for his whisper. "Stay with me. Father's coming. You'll be all right." Desperation drove her words. She threw off the blanket and pressed a pile of towels on the blood, but there was no response from Anze. "No, no," she wailed in frustration. Eyes wide, Olga and Anna clung to each other, watching from the doorway. Take the girls, Paulina motioned toward the stairs to their bedroom. Piotr picked them up gently and left the room, as Paulina continued her frantic attempt to absorb the blood. When Piotr returned, he bent his head, placing his cheek next to Andrzej's nose, and felt for a pulse in his neck. For Paulina, the passage of time hesitated like the pause of an intake of breath. Piotr shook his head, stood and placed his hands on her shoulders. He's gone. Paulina sank back onto the floor, strength drained from her limbs, oblivious to the blood staining her hands and dress. Piotr, she said, eyes vacant, uncomprehending. The broom fell. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Gail Bowen, Jessica Williams, Dwayne Brenna, and Diane Miller, 4 fabulous authors from our very own province. So thank you so much to every one of them. A thank you to Terry Toews and the committee, the Write Out Loud committee, for making this happen. And don't forget that next Saturday night at 7 p.m., we're going to have another Flight of 4, as we call them. Flight of 4 authors with their beautiful words keeping us all aloft in this tough time. We're also on Friday night premiering our very first electronic version of Open Stage. So don't miss that at 7 o'clock, Open Stage as part of the Lyric Digital Stage. I also want to thank in particular Joey Donnelly, who has put all these pieces of video together. We can't thank you enough, Joey. And Joey's also one of our board members, we're happy to say. Also want to thank iTunes, where I managed to get this music royalty-free. We have to obviously be very careful about making sure that we live up to all royalty agreements. So this was very fortunate. We hope you enjoyed that as well. Okay, so stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next week, and thank you so much for your support. Take care.